So yeah, we're here for my talk called, well, for here it's called Tough Trees for Urban Places. Other places it has a more risque name that's a lot more fun, but Chris made me stop it. Anyway, uh, a theme is going to run through a plea for nuanced thinking as we go through and talk about trees. We're actually using trees, this tree list that I put together as a launching point, more or less, for a lot of ideas. So we'll see how it goes. I just pushed the button and nothing happened. There we go. So I do want to thank Chris for inviting me. There are a lot of good speakers locally in town that he could have chosen. I looked desperately through my list of photos for something more incriminating of Chris, but he's so well behaved. He never gets out of line, and you just don't have that opportunity. But looking at this picture, it just reminds me of how long I've known Chris. Chris could have gotten my boss, Steve Foltz, a great speaker here also. Well, not also, that makes me sound like I'm thinking I'm a great speaker, which I think I'm mediocre. But he knows trees better than anybody in this town, I think. And there you see Steve in his natural element. Chris could have also gotten Joe Boggs, and damn it, we're all out of order. I had him in his natural element too, which was in jail. I had a great picture of that, but it didn't work. But no, Chris chose me, and that's not the picture I wanted. I wanted to use this picture. So I'm going to risk my talk like that. But I came here mostly, I want to start off by apologizing to trees for the many things that we do wrong with trees. First and foremost, we make them look ridiculous. We're really good. Oh, I wanted to show this part. I can't go backward. Yeah, I can. I love the one on the left because whoever clips these trees so carefully put road cones out so cars couldn't park there, so the trees could be more easily seen all the time. All kinds of crazy things. If you look around, you see trees put in crazy situations. This is at the Scott Arboretum, and you're on thin ice when you start criticizing anything the Scott Arboretum does. And I'm not criticizing this. This is pretty cool, actually. But if you were those ginkgos, you would be pretty embarrassed, I think. You look at the other ginkgos and you're saying to yourself, look at me, look at them, it's not fair. We subject trees to our ignorance over and over and over. Things like this with red maples, planting above ground, the plastic mulch, so forth. Here they had, what, a mile on either side to run that pipe up to the building, and they went right through the tree. And I guarantee the plumber, said, it'll be fine. And the homeowner was like, well, if the plumber thinks it's fine. But no, this is a good one. When you're working with contractors, you have to be so careful about how you spec things out. That's in Los Angeles. I mean, that is amazing, actually. I hope they never fix that because it's just such a great picture. Water lines were broken. It was pretty amazing. This is one of the worst. So this is not far from here, and these are ash trees that were being treated at some expense. I don't know really how expensive that is anymore, but they were being treated to save them from the emerald ash borer, and then also, they paid somebody to mulch them in a way that will cause them a lot of harm. And that's that kind of thing is so elementary. Nobody has ever taught that you should mulch like this. Nobody's ever, no magazines, no educators, no books. It's just not to be found as recommended either now or way in the past. It just sort of happened somehow. And you know that anybody who does this kind of mulching has never read anything. They don't know anything. They've never been to a class. And yet they're a professional getting contracts to do work. One of the I think, it's frequently called what is it, volcano mulching? Wrong title. It needs to be renamed toilet plunger mulching. And I think if that catches on, and we're seeing, people are like, oh man, I don't want to make my trees look like toilet plungers, and we might start to see some change. Quality control problems that's out there. There are nefarious operators, as we all know. And then we put trees in a lot of unwinnable situations. So this is very common. It definitely is a no-win thing. I have mixed emotions about, because those trees have been hacked without mercy, but they are calorie pairs. So yeah, it's kind of like, well, anyway, look at that's almost like a piece of art. This was one I saw this summer. At first, it was kind of encouraging. From a distance, I'm looking at this. I'm wondering, what is that beautiful tree? It's at a brewery where they have a lot of activities, a lot of families. It's really a cool place. And it turns out you can see that they went to some effort to save this tree. They did some kind of construction project, and they put this walkway around it, and they made space for the tree, but it was, all done wrong. And look at the problem. Like, this tree at some point had been used with strapping and chains. And if somebody who had known anything about trees had looked at this before they went to all that effort, it could have saved them a lot of money. The time it's going to take this tree to die, because it looks actually pretty good right now. And maybe they could have used that money towards a better tree planting or something like that. So parking island beds, that's one of the things I want to apologize to trees the most for. They're just so often done poorly. And I put together a list of things that parking islands are good for. One is they're pretty good at collecting loose trash. So it makes, I think, it a little bit easier to clean up. You just go. They're also good at creating new wetlands. Occasionally, they're great places to pile snow. The saltier and dirtier, the better. They're good at refreshing truck drivers on how to drive, how to steer. And they're really good at creating 3 seasons of beauty all at one time. So what we have here is fall on the left, winter in the center, and summer on the right. When you stress trees, you get all kinds of fabulous aesthetic benefits. The trees are very resilient, and somehow, despite it all, sometimes they succeed. This is a pecan at the Dairy Mart in Newtown. As you can see, there is no open soil for maybe 3/4 of an acre, and what there is around behind the building. And yet it stood there for many years. It was cut down this summer because it was damaging the foundation. I don't know, but it managed to not only live, but thrive. It looked great. It produced nuts every year. It's pretty amazing what trees are capable of sometimes. This is what I call the Jiffy Lube paper birch. For years, I've been waiting for this to die out in front of the paper birch, or the Jiffy Lube on Beachmont Avenue, because we all know how hard it is to grow a paper birch in Cincinnati, right? People have tried by giving them all kinds of TLC, doing all the right things, and just to have them die. And here it is in front of a Jiffy Lube. The mechanics aren't like, oh man, we haven't got fertilizer on there in 2 years, or we should vertical mulch that again. That's just, those conversations aren't happening. But probably not even getting watered, and yet year after year after year it thrives. And I think I figured it out. What typically happens to paper birches is, it's too hot, it's too dry here. They get stressed. And then bronze birch borers find it and attack it and wind up killing it. But, you know, here we are on Beachmont Avenue with nothing but urban sprawl. And what a bronze birch borer is going to think to itself, I'll go looking for a birch tree there. So it just escapes. It just goes under the radar and continues to grow. And, you know, they surprise us, they succeed. And when they do, it's transformational. It could take a neighborhood from ordinary to extraordinary so easily. So not quickly, but that's what trees do. Here we have a road, a little street called Allendale in Oakley. And these are all pin oaks. This is a picture I took last fall. Just stunning, absolutely stunning. You know, transformational effect on this neighborhood. Unfortunately, Helene came this summer and pretty much wiped it out. So it's a good example of how transformational trees are when we have them and also when we lose them. It can happen too quick. And this is why we have to be smart with trees. This is why we have to be planning ahead, sometimes many years for trees. We always have to be thinking. And we need tough trees. So here's my list of tough trees. Catalpa, hackberry, hardy rubber tree, actually took that out later in the talk. Ginkgo, Kentucky coffee tree, McClura, which is Osage orange, London plane, bald cypress, and Zelkova. So there's the list. I thank you for coming tonight. And I'll be at the bar, the nearest one, and ask questions there. So thanks very much. I appreciate you coming. Now, but there's a trouble with tree lists, and you see it all too often. So what's the problem here? It's too small, right? There's no context. There's no nuance. It's just a list. It's not telling anybody very much. And it's no fun. It's sterile. So I Googled this, best trees for America, just Googled it. And there are a million lists on the internet. And some of them are better than others. You know, here's a very prominent website that does a lot of this stuff. 28 best dwarf trees for landscaping. Okay, where, you know, how? The one I like is 11 species of walnut trees for North American landscapes. And I'm like, all the walnut species I know add up to like 3. So I need to explore that and see what they were actually doing. You know, anybody, the family handyman, there's your expert on trees. This is a list I pulled up, 18 best medium-sized trees. This was on the internet, very prominent website. Actually written by, I checked these people out. One is a retired Cornell extension agent. That's really good credentials. The other one had good credentials too. But look at the list. When did you ever think you would see dwarf Alberta spruce on the same list as golden rain chain tree or mimosa? So we've got red buckeye. Okay, that's a decent choice. Not the easiest tree to grow. Crabapple, which one? That's so important when planting a crabapple, is picking the right one that is disease resistant. Crepe myrtle, yeah, okay, they had hardiness zones in when you check the plant. But still, there's more to that story than just saying crepe myrtles. Go grow one. Dogwood, they didn't even tell you which dogwood it was, just dogwood. And then you go, you know, it's a mimosa, which is invasive in some parts of the South. Dwarf Alberta spruce is so hard to grow in places too hard yet. Impossible to grow for us, yet it's just on the list. So here we go, too small, no context, no nuance, and no fun. And kind of crazy. And worse, really, than no help at all in the end, right? You all in agreement with me on that one? Did I lose you guys already? Worse than no help at all. So when you're confronted with a list, you got, here's a list of things to ask yourself when you're confronted by a list. One is, what idiot is making the list? Where is that idiot from? What is their criteria? What's their motive? Are they just trying to get hits on a website and earn money by being paid for the hits, like what we saw before? It's going to be subjective. It can be used wrong. It gets locked in time. These lists are lazy. They're oversimplified over what we should be considering when we're choosing trees, and they inherently limit diversity. And let me emphasize that they inherently limit diversity because we're at the intersection of elm and chestnut. And you guys have no idea how long I looked on the internet to find an intersection of two problem trees. Finally did, and it was up in Oxford. Got a friend to take the picture for me. But seriously, we are at a crossroads of what we can do with trees, and it's important to get good information. But lists are important simply because not everyone is as interested as everybody in this room. No one seems to have any time, and they just want quick, easy answers. So again, we return to a list of trees. So here we start with the toughest ones on my list. Just plain ordinary or ornery trees like junkyard dogs. Who remembers that song, that Leroy Brown, meaner than a junkyard dog? So I really like catalpa. It's a very coarse tree. It has this sort of ugly majesty. It looks like it's been weathered a million years, even a young tree. It just has character. This is at the corner of Dana and Victory near Xavier University, and I've been worried for years that Xavier will eventually just cut this down. Very happy to learn recently that Marianne Prue, the city forester for this region, that tree actually is on city land and they cannot cut it down. They have asked to, she will not let them. So that tree will live. It was a favorite species of John Aston Warder, who was an early proponent in the United States for reforesting. He was a local Cincinnati guy. This is his home on the west side of Cincinnati, and he had one on his property, probably still there, probably from his time. Great big wound, hollow trunk, and yet looking good. This is one I found in Kentucky, probably a lightning strike, pretty catastrophic wound, and yet it's compartmentalizing just fine and looked great otherwise. It can grow in really good sites. You can plant it almost anywhere, but it will grow in a good site. But this is its preferred habitat, growing out of cracks in pavement next to a burned out crack house. Does have beautiful flowers. I think they're fragrant. I think that's what I'm smelling at that time of year when they're in bloom. That's one in Hyde Park that I really, really like. Fall color is often described as a weak yellow. When I hear that, I just tell people, well, you're a weak yellow, and it seems to work. But here at the zoo, beautiful trees, probably original to Strout's design in the 1800s. And the fall color really, sometimes it's better than others. So occasionally you get a good solid yellow out of it. But there's a problem with catalpa, and you'll hear it over and over. Well, actually, I had a guy come up to me one time, and we were talking, and it was just a bad day. And he came up and he was like, catalpas are just such dirty trees. And I kind of snapped a little. I said, think about all your CO2 emissions and all your single-use plastic and all the garbage you haul to the street. And all the other filth and waste that you put into the world. And you're telling me catalpa is a dirty tree? I'll tell you what, that guy, he beat the hell out of me. So I've learned like to be more diplomatic in the future. But when we're talking about urban trees, I think a lot of times we go immediately to street trees. And that's just one part of it. We also have yard trees and little yards, big yards, anything from urban core out in the suburbs. And then we have spaces. In Cincinnati, we're lucky because we're not a grid city. We have ravines and open spaces. But also in any city, you're going to have some bigger campuses, businesses, colleges, schools, where you have room. So, when we talk about urban trees, there's kind of a range of possibilities. But when we're planning in urban areas, you just never know what you're going to find. The zoo helped out on a tree planting last week, a school. It looked like good open area with probably decent soil. We had 3 holes dug together within 30 feet of each other. One was full of brick, the other was full of cobbles, and the other was full of a heavy gravel. So these are what you find. These conditions are what you find when you go out there and start planting in urban areas. There's a lot of buried secrets, let's put it that way. So our next tree on the list is hackberry. This is one nobody thinks of. Hey, I'll go buy a hackberry and put it in the ground. But it's a pretty solid, tough tree. It's great for insects. Lepidoptera use it. Especially I think of it as that alley tree. Behind the alley, the garage in the alley, it showed up on its own. Just let it grow. It'll be fine. It's more green. It's all good. But I did a little survey at Spring Grove the other day, and I looked at some leaves, and so on the far left we've got Coleruteria, and then we have a sumac, and on the upper right above it, root ginkgo, and then tulip poplar and red maple, and then we've got below that dogwood and black gum, and then on the bottom right you can see like the fall color on hackberry. So it's not really a fair comparison. So it's not the kind of tree that most people are going to seek. But when we're looking at trying to get diversity into, is there anything that can be done? Should we move? Let me step back. Make it harder for me to see, but maybe that's better, right? Yay. So when we're thinking about, adding diversity into the urban landscape, let's not forget about some of these things. And here's the secret about hackberry is as a young tree, they're the ugly duckling. They are. They're coarse. They have nipple gall. They have all kinds of things that don't make them very, very beautiful. But when they get big, when they get old, then that's their time. They take on this grandeur. The nipple gall, the ugly leaves are way up high. You can't see them. It's producing everything that the fruit for the birds. The Lepidoptera are feeding on it, and it's growing where a lot of other things just will never grow. So think about it. The nice thing too is people are working on it. So these are 2 trees the Morton Arboretum developed in Chicago. 2 varieties of hackberry with cleaner foliage, with better form. So opportunities for diversity, opportunities for thinking about new things in the landscape, a chance for a more nuanced conversation. I thought I pulled this out because of the time constraints, but hardy rubber, nothing exciting about whatsoever. Terrible fall color, just a tough tree. I've seen the city put this in the middle of a drought as a street tree, replacing red maples that had died. No water, no care, no rain for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards. Survive it. So if you're looking for something impossibly tough, a good choice. And then ginkgo, one of my favorite trees. Talk about grandeur. When these get some age, they start slow, but then they get some speed going and really develop a lot of grandeur. And the fall color is unbeatable. Move, try moving. Okay. So Yeah, it's one of my favorite trees for fall color. Some people will say it's just yellow. Hey, not if every leaf in the fall was red, then we'd be going like, well, it's just red. So, yellow, and this is a better yellow too. This is a gold. This is a beautiful, beautiful color in the fall. And the leaves all tend to fall all at one time. And it's mesmerizing and beautiful when it does. But it's dangerous. This is my house. We had a little black dog that actually got crushed when all the leaves fell at the same time. Wasn't funny to us, but anyway, it's almost like that. It's almost like all all in a single day. My wife took this picture. This is a children's hospital, and I think they had a big project, and I counted a planting of 162 ginkgo all at the same time as part of this project. And I think I know what happened. It was hard. It's like 4:30 on Friday. Everybody else at the landscape architect company, they were done. They were leaving, going to happy hour, and the guy who was supposed to do the trees is still like hadn't done his work. So it was like, okay, 162 ginkgos done. All right, I'm going to happy hour too. And what do you all think is the problem with that? Yeah, monoculture. I heard it. So let's think about monoculture for a minute. Yeah, it's typical. I mean, we do want diversity. I've already been talking about diversity, but we're also talking about putting trees in tough urban places. So let's explore monoculture a little bit. So here's 270 million years represented on a slide, and there's mankind on the far right. That's when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And this is when ginkgo has been on the planet. So the ginkgo has been through the Permian Triassic extinction. 96% of all species were lost. It's been through the Triassic Jurassic extinction when maybe 75% of all species on the planet, plants, animals, were lost. It got through the Cretaceous Paleocene extinction. 76% of species lost. It's been through continental drift, meteors, climate change. There's 3 extinction events. Dinosaurs. If you think deer are hard on your trees, think about what a dinosaur in your yard could do. Millions of years of insects, millions of years of diseases, and then millions of years of hominids hanging around too. We did almost bring it to extinction, but it does survive actually mostly because of a few monks in China and now horticulture. It even survived an atom bomb. So this was a tree 1,200 meters from the Hiroshima bomb, blown to bits, sprouted new growth in the spring. Here it is now, living still today. So when you're thinking about monoculture or planting too many trees of one kind or whatever, and putting them in difficult spots, I think you're pretty safe if you're thinking ginkgo. So it's that nuanced conversation again. These are trees right across the street from me in my house in Anderson Township. And they kind of show one of the things that ginkgos really, the one thing I know that ginkgos cannot survive, and that is sitting in water. So don't plant them where there's standing water. Of course, this was a design, the left side of the path. You see standing water about now several months of the year. And the row of trees died, and the second row of trees just never took off. So they replaced them with more ginkgos. So we got to be thinking, it's like if a species of tree has died in a place, or any plant for that matter, it might be good to explore maybe why before we just put another one in. There's another problem with ginkgos. What is it? It's their women. They produce fruit, and the fruit is really foul. It smells, well, I'll tell you what it smells like. It smells like a little bit like dog puke and a little bit like dog poo. And it's exactly what it smelled like when my dog got crushed under all those leaves. It's foul and it permeates the air. And there it is at the zoo, at the education department, which is fine because the horticulture department is never really like the development or the education department. So their parking lot can smell bad. And then here it is at my yard. And so my ginkgo, it's about 85 years old before it started producing fruit. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it changed sexes, which happens sometimes. Maybe it's because there was never a male around. Or maybe it just took that long to reach sexual maturity. I don't know. But now it produces pounds and pounds of fruit. It stinks up the whole neighborhood, and none of my neighbors know why. And I'm trying to keep it that way. Well, a couple of years ago, my neighbor, I'm working in the front yard. This is in the backyard. I'm out in the front yard, and he comes walking over. And he's like, "Do you smell that?" And I'm like, yeah, I kind of do. So what do you think it is? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. It's like, do you think my sewer line could be broken? I'm like, yeah, maybe you better get that checked. So he did, and then I don't know if it was a fly-by-night plumbing company, but they replaced his sewer line. Probably cost thousands of dollars, I don't know, but well, what happened then was the next year, there's pounds and pounds of fruit in my backyard. The whole neighborhood stinks. I'm bringing the mail back, and he's walking over to me, and I'm thinking, oh man. He says, "You smell that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." I don't think they fixed that properly. I'm like, "Yeah, you're probably right." Luckily, he died a little bit late after that. And his wife was a shut-in, and they would just periodically wheel her out onto the patio. And one time I heard her just going like, "Let me in, let me in." Finally, they did. They weren't quick about it. I would get rid of that tree. Honestly, I would, but my wife won't let me. She likes it for some reason, just because I think she doesn't like me much, and I'm the one that has to deal with it. I'm the one that, you know, is worried about getting beat up by neighbors again. But by the way, that neighbor was the same guy that beat me up over the cowbell. So, but and then you'll hear ginkgos are plastic trees, right? If you heard that about other plants or trees or whatever, people will go, it serves no purpose in the landscape. Uh, and when you look at it, okay, the ginkgo leaves come out perfect in the spring. They stay perfect all summer. They fall all at once perfect in the fall. Nothing has eaten a hole, a margin. They're clean all the way through. So yeah, nobody eats ginkgo leaves. And if you're like in the Lepidoptera camp, that's a disaster. You're calling out everything about that. But again, let's think it through. Because the females do produce that fruit, and something eats it. Because when that falls and I pile it up, within 3 or 4 weeks, it's gone. So chipmunks and other things, they're out there eating the fruit, believe it or not. It smells so bad, but they seem to like it. Sort of a version of stinky cheese, maybe. I don't know. People actually will eat the nut inside. So that's kind of good. And it provides habitat, right? So that's good for wildlife and people, right? At least there's that. And then people forget it is a plant. What do plants do? They photosynthesize. So they're cleaning the air, they're cleaning water, they're holding soil in place, they're capturing CO2, they're creating biomass. Even if Lepidoptera don't eat them, they're still doing a lot of services. And we just got to keep that in mind. So this is good for the planet. So ginkgos are doing all this stuff, and they're doing it in places where nothing else grows sometimes, in those hard urban areas. So when you hear somebody say something so stupid as, "Oh, it's a plastic tree," beat them up. And, or if you can't beat them up, just try to embarrass them really badly. Tell their friends how stupid they are for saying something so dumb. Anyway, more nuanced conversation once again. Kentucky coffee trees, another tree I really love. Another tree that has, the females produce a big heavy pod that's very sticky. So you want to use the male cultivars. But you can grow this at literally anywhere except probably standing water. I haven't seen it tried, but here it is at the Dahl's Arboretum. Row of them looking great. It's a very coarse tree in the wintertime, but it does have this doubly pinnate foliage, which when it opens is, first of all, it's just beautiful. I think we should pay more attention to the small parts of big trees, especially when they open in the springtime. There's a lot to see there. But then when they open up completely, it's like putting a wedding dress on a very bony, skinny bride. But it just becomes this beautiful, beautiful tree that can grow in a place like this on a health strip on a very hilly street where no one is paying attention to it. Nobody's giving it water or attention, and it grows year after year, and it looks good, and it does all those services for us. McClura, again, not going to win a beauty contest, but Osage orange is a really tough tree that we ought to think about sometimes. It's not great for every application, but these older ones have, again, that sort of ugly majesty, that gnarliness, that venerable look that is in its own way is very, very beautiful, that sort of stark beauty. You often see it in hedges because farmers used to use it to contain livestock. This is one at the Cincinnati Art Museum, just down the street, where 1 million generations of kids have climbed on this thing and had interaction with a tree in a very, very difficult spot, basically on the edge of a cliff. A whole bunch of kids maybe have fallen off the cliff, I don't know. But here we see it used on a country lane in horse country down near Lexington. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a problem here. Do you guys have any idea what it might be? Yeah, millionaire horse farm owners driving in their Bentleys and this fruit falling from trees. Now, the normal Osage orange fruit is on the left. If you really don't like millionaire horse farm owners, you could get Cannonball, which Guy Sternberg found. But we can also, and this is in Tusculum, or Mount Lookout. Tusculum. It's where the Painted Ladies are in Cincinnati. This is one of the steepest hills you will ever see. And somewhere near the top of this hill is an Osage orange. And I have seen these fruits careening down the hill. Invariably, there's a woman pushing a stroller across the street at the bottom. One time there were a bunch of puppies. It's a real danger. And so this is not a nuanced conversation whatsoever. This is like, do not plant Osage orange at the top of big hills unless you're completely psychopathic. Or you're planting one called White Shield, which is a fruitless cultivar. So here is used at Mesker Park Zoo in Evansville. Normally the last thing you would ever want to do is plant an Osage orange in a parking lot. Friend Paul Bausman did it, knowing that it's never going to produce fruit, never hurt anybody or cars or anything like that. London Plains, I hesitated to put this in because I think everybody knows London Plain can handle these conditions. But time and time again, you see it put in places and look great and function, and really create real beauty. It's a hybrid between our sycamore and a similar species from Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. So it doesn't quite have the beauty of bark of our sycamore, but still a beautiful tree in urban neighborhoods. Or you can get the form called Sutneri, which is actually, in my opinion, more white and more beautiful than our sycamore. This is one you kind of have to seek out. Steve Foltz has been promoting this for as long as I've known him. It's a great tree and one that should be considered. It is absolutely a stunner for its white bark. Bald cypress, another one, it's going to make every tree a tough tree list. Little hard to work in the some urban landscapes because it's often low branched. Sometimes it has needs. You can put it in standing water, but grow it also in just ordinary soil. It can take it. Here's a relatively new cultivar called Falling Waters, which probably makes it a lot more easy to use in a lot of urban situations. I look forward to many years of watching this tree get older and better every year. I think it's going to be a real statement in the decades to come. Japanese Alcova, not only just rock steady, so tough, but you can almost put it anywhere and it will live. Again, I wouldn't go so far as to say standing water, but that's about the only thing I would hesitate about it. Has that old elm-like shape, the cathedral type branching that can really make a street special. It's not going to feed the lepidoptera. You know, the butterflies and moths are going to have to go somewhere else. It will drop clean leaves in the fall. But again, think about all the other attributes. Think about where you can put it, and you will find uses for it. Good fall color, too. And when it gets really old, extraordinary bark. It takes a while. I mean, bark's never bad, but when it gets old, it's really cool. It's the one big tree that has a variegated form that I kind of like. So Goshiki is a really beautiful variegated form. A good, solid, fast grower, good performer, and it doesn't look weak or sick from a distance. It just is a good-looking tree. So the next round are tough, like old wiry welterweights. So not quite as tough as the junkyard dog, but close. I like trident maples. You know, a Norway maple group tree can live almost anywhere. Going to have those shallow roots that maples often have, but good foliage, variable foliage. There's different forms of the leaf from the same tree, so it's kind of interesting that way. And then Acer griseum, or the lace bark or paper bark maple. Remarkably tough. A lot of times we think these really beautiful trees are going to be fragile or hard to grow. Sometimes they are, but a lot of them are not. They can grow in these difficult spots. Now, it is a very slow grower. I have seen a neighborhood in Cincinnati where they had these planted in the house strip, and they just barely grew for years and years. Perfectly healthy, very little growth. The homeowners eventually convinced the city to take them out and put something else in. So your better choice for situations like that might be one of the hybrids of paper bark maple with Acer maximovixium. So you get not quite the coolness, the same bark, but good bark, faster growth, and reliable fall color. Really good. Acer miyabe, relatively newcomer to the market. State Street is very common now. More of an upright grower. The straight species tends to be a round, shrubby tree. This grows upright. You're seeing it a lot in street tree applications. Very late, a very beautiful gold fall color. Acer tataricum, Tatar maple. Another tough shrubby. This is a shrubby maple, much smaller. The variety Hot Wings has really cool samaras that bring a lot of color for a period of time. Yellow buckeye, you don't see this on tough tree lists very often, but it is a remarkably tough tree. That's Guy Sternberg. He's coming to speak for us next week with a yellow buckeye. Good big buckeyes that keep their leaves all season, unlike the Ohio buckeye. So it does have fall color, good flowers, although they're often very high up in the tree. This is the reason I would call it a tough one. This is a tree that grew in University Heights. It's been cut down since, year after year after year of total neglect, right by the street, and just kept on keeping on, looking good. And like I said, because it keeps its leaves, it does get fall color. Hornbeams. Chris, you knew I would get there. I love hornbeams. European hornbeam is a tough tree. Not as tough as I've seen it used in situations that were just too tough for it. But I know a lot of people come to me at various things and said, "Yeah, I'm confused between hornbeams and beech. I can't tell them apart." And it's funny because they're not even related. So I just put this in here in case it helps you. So here we have Dr. Evil on the right. He's representing beech. And then now we have Mini-Me on the left representing a hornbeam. So much smaller, but a lot of the same look. Other groups have laughed much harder at that. I'm disappointed in you. So I love the straight species. You almost never see it anymore. You're almost always seeing one of the other forms. So, you know, the loose open form of the species is great. I hope it's still out there somewhere and used somewhere. But what you typically find are the fastigiate forms here at the Taft Museum downtown. You know, tall, skinny, globular, round forms. Other different, slightly different fastigiate form. This is Franz Fontaine. And then weeping forms, and then there's other options as well. If you don't like any of the shapes they come in, you can make them your own shape. They take hedging very well. Here is hedged somewhere. I can't remember where I took. Oh, Franklin Park Conservatory. This is at Churchill Downs. They've carved them out to look like enemas. I think that's like a horse farm thing. And then this one, this is at Bartlett Research Arboretum. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Until I got inside. And then I was like, whoa, it was so cool. This is at the Pottery Garden in Heronswood. I probably took this picture maybe in the 90s when I went to visit Heronswood on, I guess it's Bainbridge Island in Washington State. And Dan Hinckley had just fairly recently planted these and started the form. And then a lot of time has passed. Dan Hinckley has moved on from Heronswood. Heronswood went through a period of neglect. But we got there just a month ago or so, Michelle and I did. And I was so pleased to see that that was still there. I think that's really, really beautiful and very cool. And actually, I was told that a volunteer would sneak onto the property and maintain it, just that hedge or that potager or whatever you're calling that, hoping that there'd be a time again when it would be a garden or whatever, and it would stay. And that time did in fact come. I'm a weird guy. I did something stupid. I collected hornbeams for a while, and it's stupid because pretty much all hornbeams are alike. So these are some that I have growing in my yard, and a few others, and others that I got and gave to other people. But it was a really cool experience. I learned a lot from it. I grew some of them from seeds, some from plants I bought in. But you learn a lot about plants that way, and it was a lot of fun for me. But you know, with hornbeams, it's a great leaping off point to think about some other things. Like, so the European hornbeam that we grow in a lot of times parking lots or urban situations, and then we have our native. And look at these native ranges, how amazing they are. Now, the European one is the one that has all those different forms, fastigiate, round, weeping, all of that. The American is like, nope, I'm just going to be me. It's always the same. You know, it's never had I think there's one cultivar out there. It's because it has a little bit redder fall color. But look at these native ranges and just think of the possibilities as we face, you know, try to put trees in tough urban situations, or climate change where maybe we're getting hotter, maybe we're getting drier. And by picking where we select the plant from, the seed source, we can maybe aim for certain goals. Same with our native here on the right. Look at that. If climate change gets really out of whack, we might be picking them out of Honduras to use in our gardens. But it's interesting to think about the importance of provenance and what it can mean planting trees in our gardens. So my experiment, maybe it was kind of dumb, but it did introduce me to all these different trees. And almost all of them come from Western China through India, down into the Caucasus to Iran. Really tough areas, hot, dry, cold, continental climates like we have. And there might be all this untapped, unexplored potential for using these as street trees. But what happens? They're rare when they come into the country. they're whisked off to an arboretum that puts them in a specimen place, in a good site, and then just grows them. Nobody's putting them in street tree situations or in urban areas to see what they can do. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's something we ought to try to do, whether it's arboretums, maybe cities can devote some of their space to just trialing out some of these trees that have never been really tried in these situations. Same with the other species. Beech, we have some really serious looking beech diseases that could potentially wipe out our European beech that we use in cultivated places and even our Native American beech. There are Asian species. This problem, the nematodes, probably came from Asia, so maybe there are some options there to keep beech in our landscapes, in our world, and in North America. And same with some ash and oaks and different things. So I just feel like we need to be trying some of these things in situations just to see what they're capable of. Certainly collecting data never hurt anybody. Sweet gum, I threw this one last minute, mostly because I saw a growth of them, or a patch of them that I've known for years, and just saw how great it looked. It's always been a great one for fall color, has a great form. The thing that people don't like are the gumballs. Again, wear shoes or get a good rake, get over it. But this is a group of trees. This used to be a golf course, a parking lot for it. It's no longer in use. These trees receive no care whatsoever. It floods sometimes. You can see it's hot and dry. It's ugly. It's just a tough place to grow, and yet they've just continued on and on and on quite well. And they were topped. They were cut back really low because there's power lines overhead, and that was decades ago, and they still just continue to do really well. And then there is the fastigiform slender silhouette, which you can use in fun ways. And there's Michelle in the center of them. And as you know, she's freakishly huge, so it's thrown off the scale completely, but there she is. Swamp white oaks, just a magnificent tree that can be used anywhere. It doesn't have to be used in a swamp. It can grow in a swamp. It can deal with low oxygen situations, but it can grow anywhere. And it's a tough, beautiful oak that you can use in landscapes. And as we know, again, oaks are just great for the full spectrum of wildlife, including Lepidoptera. It's also one of the parents of the fest. Oh, and it's at ground 11 or at ground zero, the 9/11 memorial. It's the tree that they use, 400 of them in a monoculture to just give that site the steady beauty and calming of that trees bring to people. And that is an unbelievably tough place to grow. And they go to a lot of effort to make them survive, but they're great. It's also the parent of almost all the fastigiate oaks that you see. So it brings that toughness into a lot of those selections. Here's a good example in Over the Rhine of a very tough place where they're growing really, really nicely. Mean Girls, these are beautiful yet brutal. Japanese maple, again, you don't often see this on lists, but I think that's simply because it's such a beautiful tree. People tend to like steer towards it's hard to grow, but it's really not. It doesn't like to sit in water, but other than that, I found it very tolerant of shade, of almost full sun, and almost any kind of difficult limited root zone kind of growth. This is a Koto no Ito at my home, my favorite tree by far on the right. But this is why we'll argue with anybody that it's also a very tough tree. There you see one in just the middle of a parking lot in Cincinnati, one at the zoo in front of our animal hospital. You can see it was a very urban situation there, and then on a rooftop in Manhattan. But this, I think, is a better example of how tough this tree is. So this is what I call Pete Rose at my house, because it's a big red machine. So it starts red in the spring, holds on for a very long time, goes copper through the summer, and then back to red. It's never without a really nice color on it. And here's its growing situation. So it's in, this is probably going to get me disbarred from ISA. But I put it in there as a 1 gallon tree. It was a seedling I grew. I put it in there with the intention that I'll take it out in a year or two and plant it somewhere in the yard. Never did. So it rooted. Imagine how wrapped around in that pot those roots were. And eventually some of them got out. What did they get hit? They hit a brick patio. They wormed their way between the bricks down to what? Gravel. Through like a foot of gravel into soil, and it lives. I don't water it. It just continues and goes and goes and goes. And that's not even the worst of it, because last year I had to replumb the pool, which is right by it. So I had to cut a trench within like 3 feet of the root zone and cut through 3-inch roots doing so. And yet this year it has just been, again, steady as she goes. You know, knocking on wood, because I love this tree. It just continues with no sign of stress. Chinese redbud, Don Egoff, that's the one, because it's sterile. The regular Chinese redbud has a lot of fruit, and it does detract from the tree. But this is a pollinator magnet. It has a unique form that may work in a lot of situations, and like a beautiful flowers, tons of flowers. Kinanthus retusus, Chinese French tree. I love our American form. I like this better, and I think it's tougher. You can grow this in some difficult spots. There's a lot of variation out there. There's southern forms, northern forms. So you want to make sure you get another northern form, because hardiness is not good on the southern form, which has smaller, rounder leaves. But this is at Spring Grove. Absolute stunner in full bloom. I have it in my yard as well. Actually, I planted it in my neighbor's yard, but it's doing great. It's a looser, more open flower than the native, and I think it's not dioecious. So the American is male and female, whereas I think my experience, at least with the Chinese, is they all produce fruit. I could be wrong on that, but that's my experience. Cornus moss, cornelian cherry, another good tough one with a very strict form, almost a formal look, and it produces fruit. Also good for pollinators because it blooms very, very early and attracts them at a time when there's not much else out there. Cornus venus, this is a hybrid between Cornus cusa, the Chinese dogwood, and one from the Northwest. It's tough. It can handle a lot. You can see the flower power on it. Big flowers, about up to 5 inches or so. Pretty steady. We didn't have, 1 year we didn't have bloom, but every other year we've had bloom. And good fall color as well. Incredibly good fall color, actually. And here's why I say it's tough. My neighbor, that neighbor, their lawn care service oversprayed and got 2,4-D on this thing. And it wound up with a lot of weird twisted growth, a lot of wounds, and yet it just powered through and is closing all of them. And I really I'm very optimistic this tree will just get through it and continue growing. Perodia, persica. I didn't know much about this tree when I started at the zoo. We use it everywhere, from very dense shade to full blasted sun, dry, dry, dry. I think the only thing that could kill it would be wet soil, constantly wet soil. Here it is at the Biltmore. That's the biggest one I've ever seen. Bark is why a lot of people like it, but it does have fall color. I think they're all seed grown. There is a lot of variability in the foliage that you might get and in the bark. So it might be good to buy one that's a little bit more grown, where you can get a sense for what its fall color will be and so forth. The tree lilacs, there's reticulata and alpicanensis out there. They're both good. I really like Great Wall. I thought I had this in there, Great Wall in this talk, but then just as I was going through it last minute, I saw that it wasn't. But they're both very good trees for tough situations. Evergreen and vicious. Calocidrus decurrens. This is a native to the Northwest. Really good foliage, really beautiful bark, that tall, upright evergreen everybody seems to want, and very rare, not seen much here. Same with Juniperus rigida, rigid juniper. Nothing rigid about it as far as its form, but when you touch those needles, you'll find out why it's called rigida. But a good grower for very difficult sites. Ammon may still have some, uh, a few, yeah, and they're big, right? It's a slow grower. Yeah, and slow growing trees are getting harder to find because nursery, it's just business. They have to, anything that they're growing for a long period of time, it's just more risk, more problems, more expenses. So everybody's trying to get, trees that move. Eastern red cedar, this is the species you see along the freeways, but there's a lot of good forms of it too. Uh, Beautiful for the fruit, for the cones. Canart is a good form that we really like at the zoo. Orchidea is a form with sort of a bluish cast to it, an older variety. And then actually more of a shrub is gray owl, really nice tree. And Magnolia grandiflora, people don't think of this as tough, and I didn't either until I started working at the zoo. Mainly, I think, it is a little bit of a there's a hardiness issue with it. You got to get the right cultivars for it to grow well for you this far north. But you can put it anywhere, I think, except for wet soil, shade included. So I've seen this at the zoo. Beautiful flowers, of course, great fragrance. And here at the zoo, it's competing with bamboo as part of a screen and handling it quite nice. Nobody's watering that. It's pure competition in a hot, dry location, and it's doing pretty well. And I've seen it used as a street tree also. Kind of a tough thing to do because of its form, but a nice try at least by the city. Of the spruces, I think the toughest is Picea orientalis, a very beautiful form, again, falling in that category of slow growing, and hard to find, but a beautiful, beautiful spruce that deserves more use. You'll see a lot of them at Spring Grove Cemetery and Arboretum. And some of the older plantings around the city, Taniosho pine, beautiful red bark. Here's one, the biggest one I've ever seen in Hyde Park. Just a stunner. Typical pine, well, actually not typical, it's a two-needle pine, which is a little bit unusual in that really showy bark, but especially in the winter in low sunlight, really just kind of sparkles, shines. And then lacebark pine, people don't really think of this, I don't think, as a tough plant, but it is. You put it in almost any kind of situation. Beautiful bark, variable. Some of it is more white than others. Some has green and red in it, but a great plant. A lot of people don't know this, but Toys R Us went out of business because their landscaping was so bad. So, areas like this, we need to maybe think of new ideas for parking lots, especially, but just these difficult sites where in reality, a lot of the design is bad, a lot of the code is wrong, but there might be things we can do to make it better. At Cinemark in Milford, I think they took all the space that would have been little parking lot islands and made it one big space and put a grove of trees in. I think that's a much better idea. Just even a little bit more space at this parking lot and the right tree, Chinese elm, and you're starting to get what people hope for when they design these parking lot islands in the first place. But when maybe we can't grow trees, what about grasses? Think about, instead of just trying again and again and again to make a tree work, let's start thinking of other things, and especially if we can give just a little bit more space, you can start to see successes, even growing hydrangeas in a parking lot. That's in Chicago. That's Kenwood Mall. You're never going to grow really anything else there. So why not just go in and do the grass? Or bamboo, I know that's a dirty word, people go insane. But if you're talking about restricted areas where it cannot escape, it's biomass, it's capturing water, it's cleaning the air, it's capturing CO2. So maybe a choice that we should be thinking about in some situations. Here it is in the most miserable site I think I've ever seen, more or less over the Rhine, Somebody planted it sometime, who knows, it was an abandoned building, but it just filled out and created total biomass in in that site. And then the sumacs, this is Grow Low at one of the Hamilton County Parks, Glenwood Gardens, allowed to grow naturally, and a very good use for that plant in that location. Here I saw like they hedged it in a parking lot, and it seemed like the craziest of ideas, but actually it looked really good. And it took it and is growing very well, actually thicker and fuller, and maybe more weed suppressing than if allowed to just grow open. This is the natural preferred habitat of Rhus typhina or Staghorn sumac, an EPA Superfund site. But there it is, that beautiful fall color in the starkest of locations. Here it is at the High Line in New York, maybe one of the showiest places for it to perform. It took a plantsman like Pete Odolph to think, maybe I can take that plant and use it somewhere in gardens, and it works really well there. The great fall color. There are forms, the laciniated form that's more shrubby and also has great fall color. But if you put it in a parking lot island like this, it's going to do what? It's going to fill that out. It's going to sucker and fill that space. And when a truck driver drives through it, it's just going to refill that space within a year or so. And then again, and then again. Great plant for that. Talking about like when to use natives or not, when we're talking really tough urban conditions, we should just go for what will work and try to get as much diversity in as we can. Yeah, in the back of our minds, we should be thinking native a little bit, but that's where we are when we're in tough urban situations. As we get further out, we should be thinking more and more native if we can. It's not to say that if you're on the edge of a pristine environment, you can't grow a rose if you want to, but you need to be thinking what's appropriate, what will work. And certainly always in our mind is not releasing another invasive plant. This is a quote that I just got from Marianne Prue yesterday. I really, really like it. Talking about trying to pigeonhole native trees in urban environments. It's like elephants are native to Africa, but what they survive in downtown Johannesburg if left to their own devices. So I think that's a really great analogy. Yeah, some can take tough urban areas, but that list is relatively few, and we do want to have more diversity than just that. So we're balancing, we're thinking, we're making those nuanced decisions. Here we got the list of natives that I had in my talk. This is interesting. I came across this Catalpa speciosa. Everybody's probably thinking, okay, there's a native tree. Well, not according to the USDA NRC database. Originally, the native range was that area there along Arkansas and Missouri. And they're actually using the word invasive in other parts of the country. I don't really go along with that. I feel like, trees and plants have moved for a long time, and we're close enough that we can call that native without really feeling dirty about it. But that's what they're saying there. Same with McClura. They're talking about its native range, where it is now. And also, again, that dirty word, invasive. But, both those species are in areas where our weather is described to be in the decades to come. So that southwest weather is moving our way, according to scientists. And so, maybe thinking about what grows in those areas as we make decisions down the road isn't the worst thing. These exotics that were in my list, almost all of them are from Western China on through India into the Caucasus. And those are really tough places where trees, their natural habitat is pretty similar to what urban environments are. So for a happy life, what do you think? Just stick to this list, just plant these and we're good? Is that what we ought to do? Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, this is a list to work from and start with, but no, you just, we need to think and try to bring in diversity. Choose what we like and explore what we can do. I call it my Stewardia rule. Stewardia is the most beautiful tree I think there is out there. Beautiful flowers that span a long time through the summer. Beautiful, incredible bark. The best fall color you've ever seen. So if you have a site where you can grow a Stewardia, and we can't, it doesn't grow well here. But if you have a site that can, don't plant a hackberry. You know, just try to control that urge. And so we want that range. We want that range of possibilities and have fun with our spaces, have beauty with our spaces, have our spaces perform those ecological benefits and make cities beautiful, make our communities better. And that's me. I'm done.